We're gonna start with I think an album that's gonna have a few songs to kick off the playlist
Mhm.
because the weekend dropping the first big album of the year, the follow up to After Hours, the 2020 smash hit album that was not Grammy nominated at all with Dawn FM, just announced a week ago. Dave, I mean, where did this come from?
That was the very question, indeed. Album 5 from the weekend, but I didn't feel remotely close to a new weekend album cycle, due I think in large part to the long tail that Blinding Lights had as the second single off After Hours. But the weekend having just this banner 2 years, huge album, huge song, Super Bowl halftime show, and just Blinding Lights sticking around forever, being in the top 10 for a whole year. Only song to ever do that. Already the second most streamed song on Spotify, coming up on 3 billion streams there, setting all kinds of chart records and only leaving the chart at all like a few months ago. So I was like, oh, surely the weekend, he's chilling. But lest we forget, he hasn't toured this whole time apart from the halftime show. And like when he did Save My Tears with Ariana, he hasn't really done performing. So he had time to get back in the lab, and well, hot damn, he did. Dawn FM, really, really coming out of nowhere, because I didn't really think Take My Breath was setting us up for something, because that was also several months ago as the lead single back in August. So Dawn FM definitely surprised me, and I feel like it surprised a lot of people just by existing right now.
Yeah. When I saw that he tweeted, be awake at dawn or whatever it was a week ago, I was like, oh, we're getting something. But, my first thought was probably just a single. Maybe he's dropping something of a lead up to an album. No, he's dropping the album. And it's a concept album again. After Hours very famously had the whole Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas
Mm,
vibe to it. The
yeah.
weekend
Red
famously
suit.
getting the prosthetics in his face and having the broken noses and the bandages, the whole thing. Performing at the halftime show, very famously with all of this stuff. So Dawn FM also getting a concept of as he described it, being in purgatory and sitting in your car as you're moving towards the light, one way or the other, and you can take the album as a joyous album or as a sad album depending on how you look at it. But the weekend dons the cover with this old aged face
Mm.
of himself. It seems like he might need to tap himself into these concepts in order to make music that is maybe a little bit more, I don't know, different, maybe like push himself outside the box a little bit more. After
Mm.
Hours, I think notably was a move more towards that pop sound, that 80s pop sound that really
Yeah.
he fits really well with. So what do you make of this, like just the fact that he's kind of had these concepts for these last two that really stand out?
Yeah, I'd like to see how much he commits to this concept, because for the After Hours, he wore the red suit for 2 years. Like, it was pretty
Mhm.
easy to follow along with. But it's not like he's in old makeup for the Sacrifice music video that's out
True.
now. So I'm not sure if there's like an aesthetic thing that's easy to latch onto there. But I mean, conceptually, yeah, he's obviously just making better music, more impressive music, more like thoughtful album construction and all that stuff. But he's been at the pop forefront for a long time. Starboy was the real dive into that, but he already had pop success before even that album. So it's not really anything new there. But yeah, he is the leader of the 1980s in mainstream pop revival, and doing it arguably the best or among the best, because he's doing it beyond just like pastiche or chasing a trend. He's I think it's because the weekend's so adept at melody and so adept at forming these concepts, that when songs feel familiar, whether it's harking back to Phil Collins or Michael Jackson, whoever it may be, depending on the song, it still makes a lot of sense because he's just kind of been building up to this for so long. And it is pretty cool to listen to Dawn FM as the sequel to After Hours or just the subsequent record because I do find it quite different, even if like you can make plenty of parallels with the production. I think just there are a lot more stickier radio friendly joints on After Hours, full stop. But that is not necessarily a bad thing that Dawn FM is more like album mode, you know, seamless transitions and all that, you know.
Yeah, I think that's the first uh, detail of the album that really stood out to me was just how this felt like obviously the concept of the radio station in the car kind of as the transition point, but it really felt kind of like a power hour at points. You know, that first run from Gasoline through Sacrifice is just boom, boom, boom,
Mm.
seamless transition, and it really kind of keeps you at that like elevated energy, like high energy level. Whereas then when you get a Tale by Quincy and it kind of goes to the Out of Time, here we go again, Best Friends run, it's a little bit more toned down, but again, all kind of sewn together. So there's definitely ideas here that I think are moving away from that radio play, which is kind of funny with the radio, concept or radio s- scheme running through it. But um, he had something he wanted to get across here. Do you feel like he did that effectively in these songs?
Yeah, I think lyrically it's not quite as dark on a personal level. The way we come to associate with the weekend and his, hedonistic Lothario nature that we've come to know for so many albums at this point. It's not quite there, although there's still plenty of that. He notably shades Bella Hadid's new significant other on this while acknowledging that he's probably with Angelina Jolie at this time. So he's still being himself. But I think what kind of jumped out to me was if you look at the credits on this, the production is the Blinding Lights production crew. It's Max Martin, Oscar Holter, and who can blame him? Again, given the massive success of Blinding Lights, and yet it's not like what you associate necessarily with Max Martin. This is melodic math, pop perfection. This guy makes pop music in the lab for rapid consumption. It's not that kind of music, and yet it's from the people that you expect to give you that. And I think that speaks a long way with the weekend really having a clear vision of what kind of music he's trying to deliver. And I think for me, there is a sameness to that production. I think that's hard to deny. Like there was a viral thing on Twitter about like you can kind of like mix and mash a lot of the loops on the production side of things for the first half of that album, and it feels very familiar. I'd imagine the beats per minute is nearly identical, but it all still seems to work because it still has that melody. It still has, I think, the weekend trying to refine his lyrics to a certain sense. And yeah, do I necessarily want to be in the weekend's vision of purgatory more than that like 5 song run on After Hours? And I don't think so, but I you'd still admire the work.
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot here to like, and you do get a variety of songs. I think, like you mentioned, some of them can sound samey. That BPM and that run I mentioned in the beginning
Mm.
probably is very close together, and then you kind of get back to it near the end. But I think there's like a spectrum here of the slower toned down R&B with the more pop R&B songs at the beginning. And a song like Less Than Zero kind of feels like something in the middle of those two, right? Where it's
Mm.
it's upbeat, but it's still a little bit more toned back and softer. And I think I really enjoyed this. There's a couple of moments that left me just a little like head scratching, confused. I don't know if all of the like stories necessarily were things that I needed in there.
Mm.
Jim Carrey specifically at the end, I was like, okay, like just totally weird and out there, but also something Abel probably knew was going to kind of come across that way. Um,
Yeah. His
but
apparently dear friend and neighbor, Jim Carrey.
I mean, is he from Canada? The Weekend originally?
Of course, yeah, he's from the
Yeah.
Six. like Drake.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Jim Carrey, notably another famous Canadian star. So
Yeah.
maybe they're just boys that way. I don't know. Why don't we talk about the songs that stood out most to you? What were the tracks that grabbed you right away?
Yeah, so I'd say Gasoline, track 2 stood out to me just for the vocals. Kind of like pitched around there, pretty fun. Take My Breath, notably a different version of what we're used to. This is the album version of the song, not the single. So there's a lot more like protracted intro and outro on this version. I think overall, Take My Breath, pretty good. It was
Mm,
again kind of funny to have that song come out still in the wake of Blinding Lights domination, but uh, I think that's probably like the glitziest song here.
yeah.
And then Sacrifice, which got the first music video produced by Swedish House Mafia, of which The Weeknd just did a song with them as well. I think that chorus from The Weeknd is really, really
Hmm.
dynamite, really catchy. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of good moments too. Like really awesome to see Tyler the Creator on this album. On Here We Go Again, my 2020 album of the year meets my 2021 album of the year. Of course, that's the record where you have the shade at Bella Hadid, of course, which I actually think was some pretty savage lines. You ended up with someone so basic, faceless, someone take your pictures and frame it. And my new girl, she a movie star. Not holding anything back. I respect it.
I didn't necessarily love that song, but Tyler is always like a welcome presence, and I feel like
Yeah.
he's on that feature run where he's just always coming in and sounding uh inspired. So I
And
appreciated hearing
yeah,
that.
it also wasn't like a Tyler like rapping his ass off like with like really fast flow type of verse, which we've got a lot of recently. It was a little more restrained about sign that prenup and whatnot. So I think it still
Yeah.
works, but yeah, it's not. It was my favorite song on the album, but I think it's still notable.
I agree with you on that. That beginning run that I mentioned. Take My Breath just is such a dynamite. Fourth track on this album. I went back and listened to it like two or three times just because it really that transition from How Do I Make You Love Me, can I get those like Eye of the
Yeah,
Tiger like guitars, and then it just like brings in the synths, and it's like, whoo, okay, here we go. And then yeah, transitioning from Take My Breath to Sacrifice, again, awesome transition. You mentioned the chorus on that is super sticky. Uh, Really, those three. How Do I Make You Love Me, Take My Breath, and Sacrifice stood out.
yeah.
Gasoline. You mentioned the vocals on it. I didn't totally work for me, but I appreciate he's going for something a little different on it. Um, Now, in that like slow run, what did you think of like a song like Best Friends? Because I didn't like it on first listen, but running it back, it stood out to me on second
No,
listen.
yeah, I like Best Friends. I just like it lyrically,
Mhm.
in the wake of Euphoria returning to HBO. uh you don't want to have sex as friends no more. I'm like, wow, yeah, this is the correct vibe right now. And
Yeah.
you mentioned how do I make you love me, also I think a really impressive vocal performance from The Weekend, and that's really when I started thinking like, oh, production wise this is really just the uh Dawn FM is really just the logical landing place for where The Weeknd has been growing from a production side of things. Of course, making a few songs with Daft Punk back on Starboy, making a one-off single with Gesaffelstein, you know,
Mhm.
and now just really going all out. And yeah, you got Calvin Harris on here, you got Swedish House Mafia on here. Really, still a Max Martin joint, but it still feels like the natural, evolution, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
You mentioned Swedish House Mafia before, rumored to be headlining Coachella. Already announced they're doing a comeback. So
Right.
excited to see whatever we get from them. We'll be covering that. You also mentioned the I Heard You're Married with Calvin Harris. You got a Lil Wayne feature on that. I mean, what? Like that was one of those moments where I was like, didn't need this. I don't really
Yeah.
want to hear much from Wayne anymore. I don't know.
No, I don't. I don't. Some people say he's on the comeback trail. But I'm just not interested. Uh, yeah, yeah. I think that end, like the Jim Carrey outro, is pretty memorable at least. And
Memorable
I,
for sure.
but I actually feel like my favorite part there at the end is "Every Angel is Terrifying," which is essentially just this radio ad fitting the motif. The exotic, bizarre, and beautiful world of afterlife. I thought it was very convincing advertisement.
Yeah, thought that was pretty good. Um, yeah, overall, really pleased with this, and I feel like even though it probably doesn't reach the highs of After Hours for me, just I love the direction he's going in. He just
Mm.
feels super inspired and really
Yeah.
in his bag right now. So
Still only 31 years old too, man. You know, it's you gotta hope he wants to keep working. It's really exciting, but he's announced that there's going to be a tour supporting this, but also supporting After Hours because he had to postpone the After Hours tour a few times. So
mm,
I'm definitely interested in seeing that stadium tour just because he's really feeling himself these days and also delivering with the music at the end of the day too. So really exciting stuff.
yeah, and pretty much every place that's reviewed this has given it like high marks, 8 of 10s,
Yeah.
4 or 5 stars, 5 of 5, that sort of thing. This is going to get a lot of play, and it was being streamed relentlessly over the weekend. So
Mhm.
um, we'll be adding a few songs to our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist.